How's it going, guys? Coffee here. Today I wanted to go over the patch notes for the Diablo 4 Season 2 Season of Blood league here that we're getting. First things first, they have quite a few unique items. Some of them are going to be generic, some of them will be class-based. First one we have here, we have the Tassets of the Dawning Sky. These will give you a 6 to 10% maximum resistance to a specific damage type for 6 seconds, but the effect can only apply to one damage type at a time. Because of the second effect on the unique, they're probably not going to be that good over some of the things that are already in the game, but they are going to be there. We have this Tusk Helm of Joritz the Mighty for Barbarian. This is when you gain Berserking while you already have Berserk, you will have a 40 to 60% chance to become more enraged, granting 15% more damage, give you 2 fury per second, and give you 10% cooldown reduction. This helm is going to be really, really good on Berserker, or on Barbarian rather. And for this, it's going to be something that will probably end up seeing use all the way until you get a Shaco, if you ever get one. With that being an uber unique, you're going to see a lot of this Tusk Helm on a lot of different characters, because it's going to be really, really good on the majority of the Barbarian builds that you see around. We have Dolmen Stone here, which is casting Boulder while a Hurricane is active will cause boulders to rotate around you. This will probably see play. There will end up probably being some new build that gets built around it. This is a build enabling unique that is going to end up setting up a new playstyle, so it'll be interesting to see how this works out. We have Scoundrel's Leathers, which while you have unlimited energy from Inner Sight, your core skills have a 60 to 80% chance to spawn Caltrops, Poison Trap, or Death Trap. If this is most likely going to see heavy use as well. Getting to spam Poison Trap or Death Trap if there isn't any internal cooldown on this, you're going to see some pretty significant damage out of these, just because of the fact that you can still be scaling Poison Trap or Death Trap on top of whatever build you're playing on Rogue, and you'll be able to basically get double effectiveness out of all the levels that you end up putting into those skills. We have Blood Moon Breaches here, which is going to give your minions a 3 to 7% chance to curse enemies. Enemies affected by at least one of your curses will take 70% more damage, or 70% increased overpower damage from you. This may end up setting up for some sort of like blood minion hybrid build. We'll have to see how the numbers are with the changes to overpower. This may end up being a viable build, but people are going to end up just having to test it out. Minions are already going to be really strong on Necro this season. You're going to see in the patch notes here further, but with Bone Spear kind of being removed from the game, people are going to be most likely playing a lot of different minion builds with some sort of variance attached to them. Then we have Blue Rose here. Lucky Hit, damaging an enemy, has up to a 30% chance of forming an exploding ice spike, dealing 0.25 to 0.35 cold damage, triple the chance if the enemy is frozen. This one we'll have to see. It's a lot of this stuff. I don't know Sork that well. I don't know how well they can stack Lucky Hit, or if they have really good basic or core skills that can just repeatedly get really good Lucky Hit. So we'll have to wait for that one, or you'll have to defer to someone who actually plays Sork a little more frequently than I do. We have some new aspects that have been added. We have Aspect of Slaughter here, which gives you 20% movement speed, but you lose this bonus after taking damage. Any class that can stack any amount of barrier, this is going to be really, really good on for clear. You'll see this being used on Barbarian, or basically anything that's going to be using like Temerity or whatever to have high barrier uptime. We have Aspect of the Elements, which is going to give you 20 to 30% additive damage to a set of damage types for 7 seconds. I don't really see this being used most likely. People will probably just use it as like a filler if it's on the codex, but I don't really see it being used much more after that. We have Wanton Rupture aspect for Barbarian. Your Rupture does not remove the bleeding damage from enemies. This can occur once every 30 to 40 seconds. Bleed builds are looking pretty good this league. Basically, any crit vuln based build is basically being lowered in power, and any of the dot builds are being increased in power this league. So there's most likely going to be a very, very good Bleed Barbarian build, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this aspect being used on it. It's really just going to come down to what's available once the builds start to get formulated more, and I'll have an update with some builds further along in a few days. We have Raw Might aspect here. After you hit 15 enemies with your werebear skills, your next werebear skill will deal 30 to 50% more damage and stun enemies for 2 seconds. Again, it really is going to depend on the aspect pressure that you're feeling for this, whether or not you're going to end up using this. It may end up fitting in, it might not. With Bulwark kind of being resolved, there's going to be some room for some Druid builds, so this will just have to get tested out as well. Barbarian gets a lot more, because of how many extra weapons it has, it just has a lot of more spaces for aspects than something like Druid, so this might not get used just because of the requirements on it to use it. Then same thing here, aspect of the Artful Initiative. When you spend 100 energy, you release a cluster of exploding stun grenades to stun enemies. Your grenade skills deal 15% more damage. I don't anticipate there being a grenade build for Rogue yet, based off of how good Twisting Blades basically was unchanged. So that's still going to be kind of one of the top tier builds, or the S tier build for the league. So I don't really see Rogues having any reason to go and venture off into something untested. We have aspect of the Long Shadow here. Lucky hit. Your shadow damage over time effects have 10 to 30% chance to generate 3 essence. Damage from your Shadow Blight key passive will always generate 2 essence. This could be good, depending on if you're playing like the like Blood Mist Corpse Explosion build. That does end up stacking quite a lot of Shadow Blight procs. You can use that to get a lot of essence, but that build doesn't use essence is the problem. So for the case that can proc your Shadow Blight the most, it doesn't actually have any spender. So there isn't really anything to use this essence on. There might be some other variant that pops up that where you are actually still using essence and still just using an actual core skill. But we'll have to kind of see once the people who main Necro kind of get a hold of this a bit. Then we have Battlecaster's Aspect. Lucky hit. When your Conjuration skills hit, you have up to 30-40% chance to gain +1 rank to your Conjuration skills for 12 seconds. This can stack up to 3 times. This is absolutely going to see use. Conjuration skills got some other buffs, so you're going to see here in a minute. And this is definitely going to end up seeing play. There is going to end up being a Conjuration build on Sork. For sure. So under gameplay updates here, some general updates to the UI. You can search in your stash now. You can mark things as favorite if you are kind of build swapping between things. The enchant costs have been significantly lowered for gold. So as you can see here, by the time you get to the 3rd enchant, you're still only looking at 193,000 gold. So the amount that it is going up by is significantly less than what it was prior. Before, it was scaling so rapidly you could get into the point where you're, spending upwards of like 1 billion gold on an item if you're trying to perfect something or trying to hit something. It seems like we should be able to get our items without having to go that deep now. So that will be good. And then again, also imprinting, adding sockets, and upgrading no longer is going to affect the enchant cost as well. So that's really, really good. We went over the gems before in the previous video. These are no longer going to drop in your inventory. They're going to drop as a material now, and then you can craft them as you want them. Elixirs will no longer be basically they will no longer be filling up your inventory as quickly as they were before, because they're going to drop significantly less. This, I think, even though it's kind of a nerf, it is, I feel like it's a buff, just because how frequently you were getting them. If you were just doing Nightmare Dungeon spam, you were getting so many of them, you were basically just destroying them or filling up a stash tab with them anyways. And most likely you're going to have a specific elixir you want to run, and you'll just craft it anyways. So I'm completely fine with this. I think this is a good change. The power ranges for the items have been slightly increased, as well as the higher level of monsters that you fight. It increases the minimum item level of these items, which is good. So it highly incentivizes, again, getting higher level, pushing into higher level, and with the EXP changes that are put in as well, that you're going to see here, those are going to, hitting level 100 is going to be something that most people are doing now, based off of the changes that we're seeing. For the dungeons, we went over most of these changes before. The Nightmare Dungeon affix changes, most of them have just been made to be less annoying for basically everything. The end game activities. They've added some new world bosses. Each one of these world bosses has a specific loot table of unique items that they can drop. So this is going to be our list of target farmable uniques from the specific enemies here, or specific bosses. These aren't the only places that these uniques can drop. They're still just in the global loot table, but this makes it to where if you have something specific you want to go get, you can specifically target these bosses in order to get the drops that you want, or get them at a higher rate, at a much higher rate rather than before. So you're going to see here some of the more sought after uniques, things like Tempest Roar, things like that have been pushed all the way up to Duriel. So they want to make it to where people do have a chance to get them, but they're not going to just make it to where it's on some boss that's easy to get done at like level 50 or something like that. So something you can push towards, but it isn't just basically giving them away for free. But it's good to have a path here if we to actually target something more specific, if there is something that we really want for our build. There we have it. Outside of the bosses that we have been added to the game, they have also increased the experience and rewards for Helltide, as well as the amount of experience that you are getting from completing Whispers. So if you see here, once you start to get to like level 90 mobs, you're already getting 65% more EXP than you would be prior. This is going to be a significant boost in terms of how quickly we're actually leveling. At level 70, I think you're already, what are we getting here? What is this? This is already a 63% increase in experience. So that's going to be quite a difference here in regards to just how much EXP you're getting, how quickly we're leveling, and we should be able to kind of like push ourselves through from that like early T4 all the way to upwards into the upper 90s pretty quickly, so we can actually get to experience these higher bosses that are that require level 100, like Duriel and Uber Lilith. Some extra changes. They've buffed the minion AI, so it doesn't target invulnerable enemies as much. They have made some adjustments to renown rewards. So again, these are always pushing forward between all characters. It all gets kind of pushed together, and you won't have to do anything for any renown if you've already completed it before. So that's going to be good. In regards to the events, all of the events have had increased monster density. So pretty much events are actually going to be worth doing in Nightmare Dungeons now. For the most part, before there were only a few of them that you wanted to do, and a lot of the other ones you wanted to skip just because of how long they took. There has been some balance updates as well. Pretty much all uniques have been buffed across the board. They just wanted to make sure that if you are going to get a unique item, it's going to be used or have a use, like, because it feels bad for anyone to have a unique item that drops but it has no use for your actual build. That feels bad, so they want to ensure that if you get one, it is going to be something you are actually going to want to use. They have made a significant change to resistances. So if you are coming from Path of Exile, resistances will work exactly how they do in that, except they will cap at 70% now, with the ability through talent and gear to push them up to a maximum cap of 85%. So resistances are going to be something that you are required to build now. We can't just ignore them like we could before. Armor works exactly as it does in Path of Exile as well, to where it's only going to work against physical damage. So it's going to be important that we are actually getting resistances on our gear, as well as our normal armor stacking that we were doing before. They've added resistances to rings and amulets to accommodate for this, so we should be able to hit the resistance caps that we want or that we need fairly easy now, or without too many issues. You know, it's going to be something we still have to gear for, but it just means they've gave us some assistance here, so it's not going to put as much pressure on the gear as it might have before. Let's see here what has changed. So they've made some significant changes to the damage buckets. The TLDR version of this is pretty much that any of the critical strike damage or vulnerable damage that you get on gear is just all going to be additive now. So the multiplicative aspect of critical strike and vulnerable damage is just going to be the base that it is. So for critical strike, it's 50% increased damage or 50% more. And then for vulnerable, it's 20% more. And then anything you get on top of that from gear or anything else is going to be additive. To compensate for this, though, for certain classes, there are things on the tree or other builds or other items, talents, things on the Paragon tree that will have a multiplicative effect based off of your critical strike damage or off of your vulnerable damage. There's one specifically for Rogue that gives a lucky hit chance to increase your damage by 120% of your vulnerable damage. So things like that, they do exist still. So there's, for certain classes, they're going to still be stacking vulnerable damage or critical strike damage, but it's not just going to be this homogenous thing across the board where every single person is stacking as much critical strike damage and vuln damage as they can. The Death's Defense passive for Necro Minions is basically been just added into minions, period. So it's not something anyone has to spec in for. So this is going to work for Necro Minions and Druid Companions as well. So all minions can take only a maximum of 30% from any single hit of damage. And then this will be basically good. This is just a minion buff across the board for both Necros and Druids. So this is good. So for the class balance updates, for Barbarian, the bonus damage granted while Berserking is active is now multiplicative instead of additive. This is a buff. This is good. Enhanced Bash, the Fortify amount was changed from being based on base life to maximum life. This is pretty significant because before, basically any additional things that you were getting to increase your life or increase your maximum life were just making it harder to actually cap your Fortify, but not actually increasing your Fortify amount. So for anyone who is stacking anything kind of tanky, you should see your Fortify amounts basically increasing by at least double of what they were before. The damage on Upheaval was increased from 0.7 to 0.77. So that's a little buff here, whatever that is, 8-10%, something like that. We have Furious Upheaval, which had the bonus damage per stack increased from 5 to 12%. But the total number of max stacks has been reduced. I haven't actually done the math on this to know whether or not it's going to be good or not. We're just going to kind of have to test these things in the game. Strategic Rallying Cry, the same changes for Fortify have been made for all of the Cries and Iron Skin. Supreme Wrath of the Berserker has a maximum damage bonus cap at 100% bonus damage. I don't think anyone is really using this anyways, so it shouldn't really affect anything. But if someone did have a broken build that was abusing this with some snapshotting stuff, they're not going to be able to do it anymore. But overall, it shouldn't have too much of an impact. They have made some adjustments because of the lowered amount of damage that we are getting from crit and vuln now. They have made it to where the monster health and everything has been scaled down accordingly, since everything is kind of be more in line now, instead of like crit vuln builds doing 10 times or 20 times more damage than anything else. Everything's been kind of more normalized now, so you should be able to do things like Uber Lilith on the majority of builds and with almost every skill now, instead of there being only outlier skills that were capable of doing it. We've had some buffs here to Endless Fury, some buffs to the maximum life for Imposing Presence, Martial Vigor, as well as Thick Skin. The Paragon board has had some buffs as well. Here, they're pretty small, but either way, anything that's, more multipliers for damage, we'll take it. So this right here, each time you make your enemy vulnerable, your damage is increased by 10% for 5 seconds. And then overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants an additional 10% more damage. This is just probably a buff just because typically anyone that was already using 200 slashing weapons, we already have other effects or other abilities to get vulnerable, typically just from our glyphs. So this isn't really necessary right here. And then we have Bone Breaker, which is overpowers. Used to be overpowers with the 200 bludgeoning weapons will stun enemies for 1 second and give you a big fortify. Now it's just every 12 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. I don't know of any builds yet that are going to use this, but there might be some overpower builds that end up popping up because of this. We'll just have to wait and see. Flawless Technique, the duration was increased from 2 to 4 seconds, and the critical strike maximum was increased, just about doubled. So this is pretty much just going to be blanket buffs across the board for Barbarian. Hemorrhage has been changed to, again, this is one of those multiplicative effects I was talking about before. Your bleeding damage is increased by 15% of the total amount of your damage to vulnerable enemies bonus. So if you do want to do vuln damage stacking, you can still use that to get a multiplier from hemorrhage, and this doesn't even require that the enemies be vulnerable. So there's going to be some bleed builds that are definitely going to come out of this. Based off of everything we're seeing and some of the new uniques, there's definitely going to be some builds out there, so looking forward to trying them. Then we have Blood Rage here, which is the additional functionality they're also adding to it is your damage dealt is increased by 25% of the total amount of your damage while Berserking Bonus. For legendary aspects here, we have the one for Hammer of the Ancients. Okay, so this is one that was actually... this one I think is probably still going to end up overall being a buff. Here, Hammer of the Ancients quakes outwards, dealing 32 to 50% of its damage to enemies. Now, instead of Hammer of the Ancients quakes outwards, and its damage is increased from 5 to 15%. So this is just going to increase both the hits, instead of it just increasing just the one before. Because before, the way you had to use Hammer of the Ancients, you wanted to be at a distance so that you were like hitting the enemy only with the quake, but not with the actual melee attack. So this is going to be better and doesn't require very specific positioning anymore. Then we have Earthstriker's Aspect here, which the weapon swap requirement for Overpower attack has been reduced from 10 to 8. And then Overpower proc now happens on your next basic attack. I haven't got to play with this much, so we're just going to have to wait and see for that. In regards to some of the unique items, Ramalodni's Magnum Opus, damage to vulnerable enemies affix, has been replaced with Maximum Fury at 150% of normal value. And damage per Fury has been increased from 0.1 to 0.3% to 0.2 to 0.4%. These will probably definitely see some builds here. This is a pretty good buff, and this is one of the target farmable uniques that's from one of the easier bosses to get. So we might be seeing some early use with this. Azurath, the non-physical damage affix, is increased by 120%. Hellhammer has had some significant changes to it. The critical strike damage affix has been replaced with bonus ranks of upheaval. I believe this goes up to +6 once you upgrade this now, so this is really, really big for upheaval. And then the damage to burning enemies affix was increased by 150%. For Ancient's Oath, the damage to slowed enemies has been replaced with damage to close enemies. And then the unique power has been adjusted. So before it just added a slow, but now it is going to make Steel Grasp launch additional change, and then enemies that have been pulled by this will take 30 to 50% bonus damage from you for 3 seconds. This is big. It might be used. It's just usable on something like Thorns. It also might just give some additional use for basically any build as just an extra multiplier that you can get by running Steel Grasp. We have Overkill here. The critical strike chance against injured enemies was replaced with just +6 to death blow or +4 prior to upgrade. But so this is going to be another item. Again, anything that's giving +2 levels of skills is going to be really, really big because that increases the damage by quite a bit. Right here, bonus ranks of Rupture FX replaced with Rupture cooldown reduction at 200% of normal value. That's pretty big. Again, just there's a lot of stuff that's pushing dot builds this league, so I'm looking forward to trying something like that. We got Battle Trance, which is bonus ranks of Frenzy, have been increased by 100%. And then damage reduction while injured has been replaced with Maximum Fury. That's good. 10,000 steps. I don't think anyone's going to use these still, but let's see here. The dexterity has been doubled. Damage with skills that swap to new weapons has been increased by 50%. And then cooldown for free ground stomp reduced from 30 to 15 seconds. Like, they're still just... There isn't really going to be a point to using these still. We're still just going to want some boots that are going to give us 50% movement speed. So that's what we're going to be going for. Rage of Hargoth, the damage reduction from bleeding enemies affix has been increased by 15%. That's just a straight buff. We'll take it. I mean, everything's pretty much going to be bleeding to some degree anyways, so Since we use that to proc Vuln or other things, that's not going to change anything. And we have Gore's Devastating Grips. The non-physical damage affix has been replaced with damage. That's good, since it just basically means it works for every build now. And then attack speed affix has been replaced with a critical strike chance against close enemies. That's good as well, because it means this works with Whirlwind, and it's just a buff for most builds on Barb. Let's go ahead, go down here to Druid. Let's see. Where did this just go? Oh, these are all. Where did this go? Why did it skip Druid down? Okay, Druid. For the uniques here, I'm not going to go over these ones as much just because I haven't played Druid as heavily. I don't really know as much of this what is or isn't going to be played. You're going to have to find a Druid player to do that more so. My experience with playing Druid was working towards a Bulwark build, and then I got bored because the character felt kind of slow before you got all your gear. So I didn't want to play it any further. Overall, the changes for Druid, though, Bulwark had a buff, or a bug with it, rather, that was causing it to, I guess, it was scaling with the target's health instead of with the player's weapon. So because of that, basically, Bulwark is probably a dead build now. We'll have to wait and see. But before, it was just incredibly overpowered for anything as you got into like Nightmare 100, things like that. So we're going to probably see different builds that people are using for Druid. Necro, I played Necro. I can give some updates here on the changes we're seeing. Pretty much for Necro, basically, there's been some buffs across the board for minions. Minions are good. Minions have been buffed. The adjustments that they have made to bone skills, the total reduction in damage that bone skills are seeing, or bone spear more specifically, it's been, it's like it's going to do like 5% of the damage that it did before. So if you were doing 1 million damage before, your new hits will be hitting for like 50k. So Bone Spear is pretty much dead with all of the adjustments that they made. Not only just nerfing Bone Spear damage directly on the tree, they've also, because of the nerfs that they've done to Vuln and crit damage, you're going to see significantly less damage from that. So they are kind of trying to push Necros off of just everyone playing Bone Spear, and they're trying to push people onto other things. Let's see here. Rogue. The only thing I know about Rogue from looking through this is that Twisting Blades pretty much was not nerfed in any degree. So Poison Twisting Blades is going to be huge. It's going to be big. It's probably going to be the best build of the league. So if you're looking for something that's going to be solid and map really, really fast, Twisting Blades Rogue is still going to be the way to go. Some big things, this new Victimized passive here. Victimized, the damage is increased by 120% of your damage versus vulnerable bonus. This is on a lucky hit. So you're going to see uses with this specifically with Pen Shot. Just because you're going to be able to use that. The lucky hit chance on that is 50%. So you're going to basically be seeing this to get some massive multipliers on Pen Shot specifically. And there is another either Paragon tree or some other items to basically further utilize with this, or further synergize with this. For Sork, I do know that Sork had some pretty significant buffs to Hydra. So summon Hydra damage increased from 12% to 60%. That's a 500% more multiplier on the skill. That's pretty big. Because of that, we're definitely going to be seeing some Conjuration builds, as I was saying before, with those other changes you saw to Conjuration builds above, on top of some of the vampire powers that we are getting. There's some pretty significant bonuses for Conjurations, which is going to be pretty nice. Outside of that, I don't know. I haven't followed too much in regards to this other stuff. So I recommend you look over them yourself if you know more about Sork. In regards to the other changes here, they had some bug fixes as well, but you guys can go over those, look over it to see if it's relevant to the class you play. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter, because it's just going to function how it functions when we play it, right? If you didn't play it before, you're not going to know what really changed. It's not really going to adjust much, which is good. Let's see here for cooperative play changes. These are all just going to be bug changes. Yep, this is all just bugs here. So, yeah. Other than that, I will be making some league starter builds that I recommend here over the next few days leading into the league start. And other than that, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And other than that, see you in the next one.